My name is Jenna. I'm 29. On New Year's Eve, my mother took me out to a fancy dinner for one reason: to shred me in front of everyone. The restaurant was beautiful. People in cocktail dresses and suits, glittering lights, champagne everywhere. For a brief, stupid moment, I let myself hope maybe this year would be different. Then my mother leaned close, her perfume sharp in my nose, and murmured in a tone that almost sounded affectionate, "We only invited you because we felt sorry for you. Try not to stay too long, all right?" I thought I'd misheard her, until I saw the pleased little curl at the corner of her mouth. My brother burst out laughing. "I mean, Jenna's always been the family flop," he announced like it was a punchline. "The one who never made it. The one we have to keep bailing out and tucking away." A few relatives snickered. Someone muttered that at least I'd managed to arrive on time for once. It felt coordinated, like they'd all silently agreed I would be the entertainment. I sat there, fingers tight around my glass, letting each word land like a hit, and then something in me went completely still. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why humiliating me was still their favorite bonding exercise. I smiled, took a slow sip, set the glass down, and told them I had an early morning. No scene. No speech. I just walked out of that restaurant alone into the icy air, their laughter echoing behind me. They assumed I left because I was fragile. They had no idea that by that night I was done. They had no idea that 1 week later, the family cabin they adored would belong to strangers. That the accounts they relied on would be closed. That the bank statements they loved to brag over would turn into a series of shocks. If you stay with me, I'll show you exactly how one petty New Year's dinner turned into the week their money vanished. 1 week after that dinner, I was on my sagging couch in my tiny Seattle apartment when my phone started losing its mind. First one call from my mom, then another, then 3 more back to back. I let them all go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, my brother Ryan's name lit up my screen. It buzzed again and again. While it vibrated in my hand, my laptop chimed nonstop with bank emails. Subject lines piled up: urgent notice, account changes, statement available. I finally accepted one of my mom's calls. All I heard was frantic breathing and her voice shrill in that way she saved for threats to her image. "Jenna, what did you do?" she practically screamed. "Do you have any idea what's happening? The cabin is gone. Do you hear me? Gone. There are people at Lake Chelan saying they're the new owners. They have contracts with your name all over them." Before I could respond, she barreled on. "The bank says some of our accounts are closed. The joint ones. The ones you were on. Auto payments bounced. There are fees. Your father is livid. What have you done to us?" In the background, I could hear my dad, Martin, barking something I couldn't make out, and my mom yelling back that she was handling it. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I watched rain drag down the gray Seattle window and let her words hang between us. Another call came in. This time Ryan. I hung up on my mom and watched his name flash insistently across the screen. When I didn't answer, he switched to text, long furious paragraphs appearing one after another. "You trashed my credit score. Do you have any idea what that does to my clients? You blew up my summer plans, our family trips, everything. How can you be this selfish?" Then the one that actually made me laugh. "All because you couldn't handle one harmless joke at dinner." I leaned my head back, closed my eyes, and let myself think about 1 week earlier. The night of that New Year's dinner, I walked home feeling like someone had flipped a switch in my chest. I came back to my little apartment with its thrift store couch and chipped mugs, dropped my keys on the counter, and just stood there in the quiet until my heartbeat slowed enough that I could move. My hands were still shaking when I opened my laptop and searched every email I'd ever gotten from a bank. Old threads. Attachments. "Just sign this, it's no big deal" messages from my dad and Ryan. Then I went to the back of my closet and pulled out the worn folder I'd been ignoring for years. Paper copies of things I'd sign without really reading because it's for the family, Jenna. Don't make it complicated. That night I finally read them like they were mine. Because they were. The cabin at Lake Chelan, the one my parents loved to flaunt to their friends, wasn't in my name for tax reasons, like they'd always said. It was in my name. Full stop. My signature. My ownership. No co-dash, no asterisk. The family emergency line of credit Ryan opened years ago when one of his deals cratered. There I was, co-applicant. Fully on the hook. The just to help you build credit joint account my mom had sold me on? They'd been using it as a lifestyle fund. Vacations, upgrades, big seasonal splurges, all tied neatly to my social security number. Page after page it hit me. I wasn't the helpless screw-up they'd mocked at dinner. I was the net. They'd woven my name quietly under every place they didn't want to fall. At some point I grabbed a pen and a blank notebook and wrote 3 words at the top of a clean page. Take it back. Underneath I made a list. The cabin. Every joint account with my name on it. Every loan, card, or bill I'd been attached to under pressure or half-truths. I didn't know the exact path yet. I just knew this. I wasn't going to stay their invisible safety harness. I thought of the one person I trusted who actually understood this world. My college friend Maya. Now a lawyer in the city. Back in the present, as my phone buzzed with my mom shrieking about strangers in her cabin and Ryan ranting about his credit, I glanced at that notebook on my coffee table. Those first 3 items were now neatly crossed out. They'd invited me to dinner as a prop. They expected me to play along like I always did. Instead, a week later, they were finally feeling what it was like to live inside the consequences of their own signatures. The morning after the dinner, once the shame had cooled into something harder and sharper, I called Maya. We hadn't caught up in a few months, but she answered on the second ring like always. Her face appeared on my laptop screen. Hair in a messy bun, oversized hoodie, all soft edges and competence, the opposite of the curated people I'd eaten with the night before. She smiled, said she'd been meaning to call me. Then her expression changed when she really looked at me. What happened, Jen? She asked. So I told her. I told her about the dinner. The whispers. The jokes. The way this wasn't new, just louder. How every time Ryan's business hit a bump, my name somehow appeared on another favor. I spun my camera toward the coffee table, covered in documents. Deeds, statements, joint account summaries. My name everywhere. I barely remembered putting it. Maya shifted from friend mode into lawyer mode in a heartbeat. Okay, she said. Slow down. Walk me through each one. We went line by line. The Lake Chalin cabin deed. The one my parents had framed as, your grandparents just wanted you to feel like it's yours too. When Maya zoomed in on the scan I'd emailed, she actually swore under her breath. Jenna, she said, this doesn't say co-owner. Says you. Owner. Singular. She asked about the line of credit with Ryan, the supposedly temporary family backup. I explained how I never saw statements unless something was on fire. How questions got brushed off with "we've got it handled." She had me screen share my online banking. We scrolled through transactions that read like a highlight reel of their life, flights, resort stays, upgrades, big holiday shopping sprees. All moving through accounts that pointed back to me. The more we clicked, the tighter my chest felt. Finally, Maya leaned back and rubbed her forehead. Here's what we're not going to do, she said. We're not going to torture life just to get revenge. We're going to follow the paperwork and do this clean. She made me take notes like I was her client, not just her friend. The cabin, she explained, was legally mine. I could keep it, rent it out, fix it, sell it. My choice. The joint accounts were more complicated, but the core was simple. If my name was on them, I had the right to close or remove myself, especially if we could show they'd been open without full, informed consent. I asked, almost whispering, if that meant I could shut down the financial web they built around my identity. You don't owe anyone your credit or your signature, she said. Not even family. If they want to play finance games, they can use their own names. She hesitated, chewing her lip. There is one move that would really hit them where it matters. But you need to know you want it. She told me about a cash-ready couple she knew from the tech world. Clients looking specifically for a place like the Lake Chalin cabin. They could move quickly, pay clean, and they had the kind of money my parents would have bragged about for years if they'd been on the other side of the deal. If you're serious about being done, Maya said, I can call them. We list the cabin quietly, prepare everything, and close fast. If the deed says what I think it says, there isn't much your parents can do to stop it. I thought about summers there with my grandparents, the only people who never treated me like a disappointment. I thought about my parents turning that same place into a backdrop for perfect family photos, posting them like I was simply too busy to join. Selling felt like slicing out one of the few soft pieces of my past. Letting them keep it felt worse. I asked what would happen to everything else if we did it her way. She laid out the steps like a recipe. Line up the sale of the cabin and lock in a closing date. Call the banks, close every joint account, and get my name off anything I've been pushed into. Document everything. Calls, emails, screenshots. If they came after me, we'd show how long they'd been hitching their security to my identity. By the time she finished, my notebook was full of arrows and bullet points. The word mine circled around cabin 3 times. I don't want to destroy them, I said quietly. I just want them to stop. Maya held my gaze. People like that usually stop only when the fallout finally lands on them. You're not taking their money, Jenna. You're taking back control of your own name. I sat with that, breathing slowly. Call your buyers, I said at last. See how fast they can move. Maya moved fast. The next morning she texted. They're interested. Can you come in this afternoon? A couple hours later, I sat in the corner of her office with a folder in my lap, while she showed a couple in their mid-30s photos of the Lake Chalin cabin on her laptop. They were exactly my parents' type. Polished, enthusiastic, talking about summers on the lake, maybe turning it into a creative retreat for tech folks. The kind of buyers my parents would have boasted about for months. A part of me wanted to slam the laptop shut and say no. This place was too tangled up in my life to pass to strangers. But every time that instinct rose, I heard my mom's voice again, that word pity curling around me, and Ryan laughing as he called me a failure. So I listened instead. Maya laid everything out. The clear title in my name, taxes current, no liens. The buyers had financing ready and enough cash to close quickly if we needed speed. When Maya named the price she thought we could reasonably ask, I watched that hungry look flicker in their eyes. Within an hour, we were drafting an offer. As we went through the pages, Maya translated legal language into plain English for me. Here you're acknowledging you're the sole owner, she said, tapping a paragraph. Here you agree to transfer title. Once you sign, this is entirely your decision, not theirs. My hand trembled a little as I picked up the pen, but I signed. By the time I walked out of her office, the cabin that had been held over me as proof of my family's generosity was on its way to people who didn't even know my parents' names. That afternoon back home, I opened my laptop for phase 2. The accounts. I started with the easiest to stomach, the family credit card that had funded everything from beach trips to dinners I'd never tasted. I called the bank, verified my identity, and asked what my options were for closing it. The representative's voice was pleasant and generic, until she looked up the account. Oh, she said. You're the primary cardholder. I went cold. I thought I was just on it to build credit, I said. No, she replied. It's your account. They're authorized users. The conversation shifted. I told her calmly I wanted the card closed. She warned me about the existing balance, about payoff requirements, about notifying authorized users. I listened, acknowledged everything, and repeated that I still wanted it shut down. Next was the line of credit Ryan had opened after one of his early disasters, sold to me as just for a little while, until I'm stable again. The banker confirmed what Maya had suspected. I was co-applicant, fully responsible. Ryan had been the one running it up. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just requested my removal and asked that the account be frozen, while they reassessed it without my information attached. They pushed back. I pushed back harder, using phrases Maya had given me about consent and misuse. Eventually they relented. Then came the rest. Utility bills for the cabin in my name. A backup checking account open with my ID and their money, used as a pass-through to shuffle funds. Little pieces of my identity braided into their everyday convenience. Every time a rep told me, yes, you're on this, it stung. Every time I got something closed or my name removed, it felt like cutting another strand of a net I hadn't known I was caught in. I documented everything just like Maya said. Call logs, confirmation emails, screenshots. At first it felt petty, like I was building a case against my own family. Then it started to feel like evidence that I wasn't imagining any of this. When I finally leaned back, the sky outside had gone that dim Seattle gray. My notebook lay open, the first 3 items crossed out in thick ink. Cabin sale pending. Joint credit card. Closing. Emergency line with Ryan. Frozen under review. In some other version of reality, I knew they were probably at home, still convinced I'd never really do anything. In this one, their favorite getaway was already slipping away, and the accounts they treated like invisible trampolines had been pulled out from under them. For the first time in years, I felt something like steadiness settle in my chest. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't begged. I just signed my own name and used a word they almost never heard from me: no. If closing the accounts and selling the cabin were all it took, this would have been over. But nothing with my family was ever that simple. Maya kept texting me the same reminder every time I sent her an update. Paper trail, Jenna. Protect yourself. She was right. My parents loved hiding behind words like family loyalty, until suddenly they preferred, it's just business. If I wanted this to last, I needed more than my own notes. I needed someone from their world to put it in writing. So, a few days after I started pulling my name off everything, I called the one person they trusted almost as much as they trusted themselves, their estate lawyer Harold Wheeler. Growing up, I'd seen his name on thick envelopes on the kitchen counter. I'd heard my dad brag, Harold is the best. He'll make sure everything's tidy when we're gone. I always assumed that meant all of us. Now I wasn't so sure. When I called his office and gave my name, the receptionist hesitated, like she expected I was calling on behalf of my parents. When she realized I wasn't, there was a subtle shift before she offered me a slot later that week. I took it. His downtown office looked exactly like my parents' taste. Dark wood, framed degrees, silent, expensive art. Harold himself was older, hair thinner, glasses heavier, but his handshake was still firm. Jenna, he said, your mother didn't mention you were coming. That's the idea, I said, smiling politely. We sat. I did what I'd done with Maya. I told him the story minus the dinner. Just facts. The cabin. The accounts. The way my name had been used. I slid a neat folder across his glossy desk. He made those little lawyer noises in his throat, tapping pages with his pen as he read. Then he pulled out my grandparents' will, the original one. It left the Lake Chelan property to Jenna, for her future. On paper it was clean. In real life, my parents had behaved as though they owned it and I was a guest. Harold frowned as he compared that will to my parents' newer estate documents. Somewhere along the way, my name had been folded into other assets until it looked like what was mine was just part of theirs. He didn't say the word fraud, but his jaw tightened. He asked about the joint accounts. I showed him the confirmations that I was primary on some of them, and how I'd already started closing things. I watched the moment he realized that, if anyone ever took a closer look, he could be standing in an uncomfortable spotlight. He removed his glasses, polished them slowly, and said in careful, measured tones, Jenna, I have advised your parents for many years. I always recommended clarity and fairness. It appears the actual execution may not have been as transparent as I'd hoped. Lawyer code 4. They got cute and dragged you into places you shouldn't have been. I asked him bluntly what that meant for me. It means, he said, matching my bluntness, we correct it. We document what your grandparents intended, and what has actually been done with your name. And for my own protection, it means that if anyone ever asks, there is a clear record that I advised them to make this right. We spent the next half hour walking through changes he could implement. Revisions to the estate plan acknowledging the true value of the cabin as something I already controlled, even as I sold it. Language clarifying that debts tied to certain lines of credit were my parents' and Ryan's responsibility, not mine. He was shielding himself, absolutely. But in doing that, he was also, maybe for the first time, shielding me. When I left his office, it felt like I just shifted one of the biggest pieces on the board. My family loved having someone like Harold on their team. Now at best he was neutral. At worst for them he was a witness. On the bus ride home, city blur sliding past, I opened Facebook and stared at the empty status box. 4 years my parents had used social media as free PR. Perfect holiday shots at the cabin. Ryan in pressed suits on rooftop bars. My mom's filtered selfies with captions about blessings and gratitude. Meanwhile, I'd been edited out in real life. I wasn't about to write an exposé. That's not who I am. But I was done silently helping them maintain the illusion. So I typed. Sometimes you grow up believing certain things are family gifts, when really your name and credit are being used as a safety net you never agreed to. This year I finally read the fine print. I'm taking back what's legally mine. And I won't be signing anything I don't fully understand ever again. I hit post. No names. No details. Just the truth in a calm enough tone that most people would read it as vague reflection. Comments came fast. Friends. Old classmates. People who knew me, and people who only knew the polished version of my family. Proud of you for setting boundaries. This hits way too close to home. Are you okay? Want to talk? Then came the ones I knew would cut deepest. A couple of my mom's church friends commented with hearts. You're so brave for sharing, sweetie. Family is complicated. Praying for you. In other words, public sympathy. The one currency my parents hated to lose. Within 10 minutes my mom texted. What is that post supposed to mean? Take it down now. You're making us look like abusers. A few minutes later, Ryan, delete that. Clients see what you post. Do you realize how bad this makes us look? All their panic concentrated, as usual, on appearances. Not on what they'd actually done. For the first time in my life, I didn't scramble to make them feel better. I didn't delete the post. I didn't reply. I just let it sit there, a small steady flag in my quiet feed. They'd used my name in private for years to buoy their lifestyle. All I'd done was use my voice in public to reclaim it. From their reaction, you'd think I'd burned the house down. The truth was, I hadn't even started the real fire yet. Ryan showed up 2 days later, pounding on my apartment door hard enough to rattle it. I just sat down with a mug of coffee and my laptop when the banging began, accompanied by him shouting my name down the hallway. I opened the door just wide enough to block his view with my body. He still craned his neck to scan my place, taking in the mismatched furniture and stack of game notes on the table, his jaw twitching in that familiar judgment. You think this is hilarious? He snapped, waving his phone. You completely torpedoed my credit. A client pulled out this morning after a routine check. What the hell did you do? I told him calmly that I'd removed myself from accounts I never should have been on, frozen a line of credit I'd been pressured into, and closed a card that was apparently mine without my real consent. He scoffed like I'd said I'd canceled Christmas. You're being ridiculous, Jenna. That stuff was handled. Dad was managing it. We were using everything strategically. That's what families do. I reminded him of the night he'd called sobbing at 2 a.m. because a deal had gone under, and he needed me to sign just this one thing, so he wouldn't lose everything. I reminded him of the vacations, the dinners, the upgrades that went through accounts linked to my identity while I was eating ramen in this apartment. He didn't bother denying any of it. He just rolled his eyes. It all evens out, he said. You got something out of it too. You got to use the cabin, didn't you? That was the moment something inside me clicked. I stepped back, swung the door open wider, and gestured to my tiny living room. Do you see a cabin here, Ryan? I asked. Do you see investment returns? A cushy savings account? Any of it? He glanced around, uncomfortable. All I see, I said, are bills with my name on them and a family that assumed I'd never read what I signed. He jabbed a finger at me. You're blowing up everything. Mom hasn't stopped crying. Dad's furious. This is going to follow me for years. You're going to ruin my career because you couldn't take a joke and a couple of forms. It wasn't a joke, I said, voice low. Not when you called me a failure at dinner. And they weren't just forms. They were my life. For a second, guilt flickered across his face. Then he shoved it down. Fine, he snapped. If you won't listen to reason, I'm bringing Dad. He'll explain it. He stomped off without waiting for a response. An hour later, there was another knock. Quieter. Heavier. When I opened the door, my father stood there in a pressed shirt, his usual calm, client-facing expression in place. He walked past me without asking and sat in my one decent chair like it belonged to him. I stayed standing. Jenna, he began, let's talk like adults. You've made some rash decisions. This affects more than just you. I'd love to talk like adults, I said. Adults read what they sign. Adults don't slip debts under their kids' names. Adults don't pretend a house is for their daughter's future, then act shocked when she treats it like it's actually hers. His jaw tightened. The cabin was a family asset, he said. We managed it on your behalf. You're not equipped to handle something like that responsibly. We stepped in to protect you. No, I said. You stepped in to use it. I pulled the folder from the table, the one with copies Maya and Harold had helped me organize, and opened it. I laid out the deed. The line of credit statements. Harold's notes about fixing the estate plan. My grandparents' will, with the line that left the cabin to me, clearly underlined. I pointed to the places my name had been quietly woven into loans and accounts that had nothing to do with me. For the first time since he'd entered, my father didn't have an immediate response. He read in silence, his expression slipping when he saw Harold's letterhead. When he realized Harold had agreed in writing to clean up the documents and clarify responsibility, a flush climbed his neck. "You went to Harold," he said slowly. "Without us." "You trust him," I said lightly. "You've always said he's the best." He set the pages down, pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaled. "All right," he said at last. "Maybe over the years some lines got blurred. But you're making a scene. That post you made, the calls, the questions. Do you have any idea how much work I've put into our reputation?" "Your reputation is your problem," I said. "My concerns are my name, my credit, my future." He switched tactics, softening his voice. "We're your parents, Jenna. Families share risk. We helped you when you needed it. We covered bills, lent you money." I asked if he had a single signed document showing a loan to me that looked anything like the meticulous paperwork attached to every favor I'd done for them. He didn't answer. Instead, he sighed and leaned back, playing what he clearly thought was his trump card. "What do you want?" he asked. "Money? An apology? Do you want us to sign something? Tell me what makes this disappear and we'll discuss it." I realized in that moment the real difference between us. He thought everything had a price. "I don't want hush money," I said. "I don't want some secret payoff. I want the accounts corrected, which is already happening. I want the estate plan to reflect reality, which Harold is working on. And I want you to stop treating me like a burden and a backup plan at the same time." I took a breath. I want out of the financial side of this family. He stared like I'd started speaking another language. "You can't just opt out of family, Jenna," he said. "You already did," I replied. "You opted me out when you invited me to dinner just to laugh at me. This is me catching up." For a long moment, the room was quiet except for the hum of my fridge. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced down. I saw my mother's name flash on the screen and a preview of her text. "The buyers are already moving into our cabin. People are asking questions. Fix this." He stood abruptly, looking older than I was used to seeing. "You've made a serious mistake," he said. "We'll see what our options are." "That's fine," I said. "I've kept every email, every statement, every screenshot. Harold and Maya both have copies." For the first time, I watched my father register that the power dynamic had shifted. He didn't slam the door when he left. Somehow that made it feel heavier. That night, my mom called me 3 times. She left 3 voicemails. In the first, she was furious, calling me ungrateful and vindictive. In the second, she sobbed about how their summer traditions were ruined, how the cabin had been the heart of the family. In the third, her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. Church friends were forwarding her my post, she said. She didn't know what to tell them. Maybe she whispered they'd gone too far. I listened once, then set my phone face down. For years, their emotions had dictated the weather in our house. Everyone else had adjusted themselves around their storms. For once, the thunder was theirs, not mine. And beneath all the anger and guilt and panic, one simple truth had finally caught up with them. Without my name quietly propping up their perfect life, they were going to have to balance on their own. Consequences don't usually arrive in a single dramatic blast. They seep in. Through updated documents. Through bland emails. Through tense conversations in offices your parents once felt safe in. A week after my dad left my apartment, Harold called me himself. His voice was as measured as always, but there was a thread of something like approval woven through it. He told me he'd met with my parents and walked them through the changes. The estate plan had been revised to honor what my grandparents actually wrote, not the convenience version my parents had grown over time. The sale price of the cabin was recorded as something I had already received and controlled, not a vague family asset they could wave around when it suited them. The various lines of credit were annotated to show who was actually responsible. There was a documented record that I had asked for clarification, and that he had advised them to fix things. Translation: if they tried to drag me into anything legal, They'd be dragging their own lawyer in with me. He wasn't about to let that happen. With that peace anchored, I finally let myself exhale. When the money from the cabin hit my account, I didn't go on a spree. I paid off the last of my real debts. I set aside money for taxes because Maya had looked me dead in the eye and said, "I love you, but the IRS doesn't care that your family used you." Then I did one thing purely for myself. I signed a lease on a small bright studio in an old building a short walk from my apartment. Big windows. Scuffed hardwood. Enough space to spread out my game ideas without balancing them on my kitchen table. The first time I unlocked that door and stepped into a room that was mine, not the family's, not held over me, something inside me unauded. I hung a couple of framed sketches from projects I'd worked on, set my laptop on a second-hand desk, took a photo and sent it to Maya. She replied with 3 words. "About time, Jenna." Across town, things were different in my parents' world. Ryan had to give up the sleek condo he'd once bragged about and move into a smaller townhouse. Some clients stayed. Others quietly chose advisors whose reports didn't have unusual activity hanging over them. My mom still posted on Facebook and Instagram, but the tone had changed. Less bragging. More caution. Like she'd realized people really were reading between the lines. A few weeks later, she messaged me asking if we could meet somewhere neutral. Just us. I said yes with conditions. No money talk. No guilt monologues. No pretending nothing had happened. We met at a coffee shop. Without our house around her, she looked smaller. For a while we just stirred our drinks, the silence heavy with everything we'd never said. Then she did something I genuinely didn't expect. She apologized. Not the familiar, "I'm sorry if you felt that way" non-apology. A real one. She said she was sorry for laughing at me at dinner. Sorry for calling my presence pity, when it was really about control. Sorry for slapping my name onto things without thinking about how they'd land on me. She said she told herself for years that they were helping me, that it was all for my own good. Because that version made it easier to ignore the way they were using me. I listened. I didn't rush to pat her arm or say it was okay. When she finished, I told her I appreciated the words, but they weren't going to magically reset anything. I told her I wasn't going full no contact. But the version of me they'd known, the one who signed anything pushed across the table to keep the peace, was gone. From now on, no joint accounts. No family emergency lines of credit. No favors that looked anything like what we just untangled. No using my work, my life, or my presence as a joke to make themselves feel superior. If they wanted me in their lives, it would have to be in a way that didn't require me to disappear. She nodded, eyes bright, and for once didn't argue. My dad took longer. He never actually said, "I'm sorry." That would have been too direct for him. But he did stop insisting I'd overreacted. When we finally did talk months later, he admitted he'd assumed I would never push back. That he'd counted on the fact that I didn't care about money and wouldn't notice how things were structured. I told him there's a difference between not caring about money and not caring about being lied to. We're not some newly soft, hug-everything-out family now. There are still gaps in conversations. Still a disconnect between the image they built and the life I chose. But there is something new: boundaries. They stand on their side with their choices. I stand on mine with mine. Here's what I wish someone had told me years ago, what I hope you hear if any of this sounds familiar. Family can be a source of love and support. That doesn't give them unlimited access to your time, your energy, or your signature. Being related to someone does not mean you owe them your credit score, your savings, or your silence. Sometimes the most caring thing you can do for yourself is read the fine print. Ask the questions everyone avoids, and say no when you've been trained to say yes. It doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you responsible. This story is not legal advice. If you're facing anything like it, talk to an actual lawyer or financial counselor before you act. What I hope it does is remind you of this. You are not a safety net. You are not a punchline. You're allowed to outgrow the role your family chose for you. You're allowed to take your name back. And if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect, you are not alone in choosing yourself.